Hello, chat. If you've made it here today, you've found demo days on LinkedIn. Today, I want you to think about your development lifecycle. How often do you ship to production? What tends to get in your way when you need to make a change? Luckily, today's story is one of progress, and especially how progress is absolutely attainable no matter what your workflow looks like today. If you find this particular topic interesting and want more insight, join us for GitHub Universe. It's just under 2 weeks away, and you can register for free at githubuniverse.com. To help me tell this story today, I welcome Cameron Stewart, Enterprise Solutions Engineer, to tell us more about how paying attention to the right things and using GitHub can accelerate the performance of your organization. Cameron?
Thanks, AJ. Hey, everybody. This is Cameron Stewart. I'm going to switch over to presentation mode. Just want to confirm everyone can see my screen. And we'll get into it with today's topic. So again, Cameron Stewart. By way of introduction, I am an enterprise solutions engineer here at GitHub. I live in Denver, Colorado, so that's why I chose this background for my intro slide, because I am fortunate enough that this is what Colorado looks like this time of year. The mountains are starting to get their first dustings of snow and the leaves are changing. So it's an exciting time of year, seasonally, for me at least. I hope the weather in your respective areas is similarly enjoyable for at least a little while longer. So I'm relatively new to GitHub as an employee. I joined about 6 months ago, but I've been a long-time user of the GitHub platform. I have a developer background and have just been a long-time fangirl of GitHub, going on, 8 years or so now. Before joining GitHub, I was playing around in kind of the cloud platform space. So I have experience deploying to cloud platforms such as Cloud Foundry or Kubernetes. So if you're interested in either of those platforms, I'm always happy to chat offline. I'm also a big fan and just overall advocate for agile software development practices. So we'll talk a little bit about how employing those practices today really go hand in hand with DevOps and really just fostering that collaborative culture within your development teams, but also, kind of bridging that gap with your operations and even security teams as well. As far as interests go, I really like to take advantage of all that Colorado has to offer. So skiing in the winter, I'm gearing up for ski season, which is really exciting. Hiking in the summer, and I also love to cook, and I am an avid crossword enthusiast. So again, if any of those interests are shared interests for you, let's connect offline, because I can geek out on those topics all day long. But for today, what we have on deck is to discuss DORA, as AJ mentioned. So first, we'll kind of just set the stage. I'm sure that the vast majority of you here are familiar with DORA and those DORA metrics, but we'll, just by way of introduction, make sure that we're all on the same playing field, talk about what DORA is, talk about those key metrics, and then we're going to dive into this year's DORA report, the Accelerate Annual DevOps Report of 2021. And throughout kind of discussing those metrics and those findings within that report, we're going to weave in how GitHub can really help you as you are on your journey to becoming one of those more elite performers that DORA speaks so much about. So that's the agenda. And without further ado, let's dive right into it. So first, setting the stage, who is DORA? No, this is not the DORA we are talking about today. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. It wouldn't be a DORA talk, oopsies, without, doing a cheeky little Dora the Explorer reference. But DORA is actually a team that's part of the Google Cloud Group, and that acronym breaks down to DevOps Research and Assessments Group. And what DORA fundamentally was set out to investigate was, what are the highest performing software companies doing today to be so successful? And so, what DORA does is it concludes this research program. And this research program represents 7 years of research from interviewing all kinds of professionals in the software industry, over 32 professionals worldwide. It's the longest running academically rigorous research of its kind. And again, it really dives into the practices that drive high performance within these technology organizations and what are the characteristics that define those companies, and really try to crack the code on what are those organizations doing that's yielding such important results for their organizations and for their revenue, of course. They group the groups of individuals into 4 different buckets, which they call elite performers, high performers, medium performers, and low performers. And fundamentally, what this is a measure of is how successful a company is at DevOps. And what the whole kind of ethos and moral of the story is with DORA is it's a way to measure yourself. And so if you might be a low performer today, that's okay, because now you have that data and those statistics so that you know where you fall on the spectrum. And, as with all things kind of data collection and monitoring, once you have that data set, that's how you can start to track progress so that you can move from a low performer to an elite performer. And that's really what we're going to dig into today, are the characteristics of those elite performers and what you can do to help you as you try to notch further towards the left. So first, let's look at those 4 key metrics that DORA talks about. The first one is the deployment frequency. This is fundamentally how fast you're able to get software out your doors and into the hands of your end users as possible. And so this really is all about talking about that value stream. We know that software is not really doing anyone any good until it's in the hands of your end users, because that's where they're actually interacting with it. That's what's generating revenue for your organization. And that's also where you're getting feedback. That's only then will you learn, how successful or how valuable a given feature is to an end user or to a customer. And so you really want to kind of have that feedback loop be as tight as possible. And so one of the things that you can do to help reduce that feedback cycle time is to deploy more frequently, to constantly be testing new features or new capabilities by getting them into the hands of your end users as possible. And so this is a key metric that DORA measures. The second one is the mean lead time for changes. So this is basically the time that it takes from your code being committed, so it being done and ready essentially, until it's actually going into production. So how long is it just kind of sitting around ready for prime time? Obviously, that's a metric that we're all trying to reduce. I just mentioned that we're trying to, get our code into the hands of our end users as fast as possible. So this is one that we're definitely trying to reduce. The third one being mean time to recover. So when there is an incident or an outage, how quickly are you able to recover and restore service from that incident? And then finally, change failure rate. So as you're introducing new changes, new features, new capabilities into your software, how often are those things causing breaking changes that require, a rollback or a patch or a hot fix? Really measuring that change failure rate is a key metric as well, as we see here. So now, one of the things that DORA also does is they have an annual report. And so this is called the Accelerate State of DevOps, where really they take those 4 key metrics and they go out and they, assess who are the elite performers. And they look at the past year's worth of data and they summarize their key findings into a report to talk about the trends that they're identifying, just what are some other, notable findings that they found as a part of this, as part of their research and results. So we're going to go through kind of the 2021 State of DevOps report and talk about those key findings, how people are improving across the industry, and then we'll also, as I mentioned, kind of talk about how GitHub can help you as you're improving on some of these areas. So first, let's talk about those 4 buckets of performers: the elite, high, the medium, and the low, and how they score across the 4 key metrics of the DORA identified that we just talked through. So first, deployment frequency. We know that elite performers are shipping software multiple times per day. We know successful organizations like Amazon, Netflix have crazy statistics that they're shipping code, in the metrics of seconds, every couple of seconds. So this is something that we know, again, those top performers are deploying at rates that, again, are just kind of mind-boggling to think about. So if you can't necessarily wrap your brain around deploying every few seconds or so, that's okay. There's even multiple times a day is an indicator that you're doing really well. On the opposite side of the spectrum, these might be companies that maybe historically their businesses weren't in software, but they're looking to transform. But right now, they're not obviously releasing software as frequently. Maybe it's, once a month or once every quarter for perhaps, or maybe even, once every 6 months, something along that. So that's definitely, again, a metric where we want to see where progress and improvement looks on actually shipping software more. Now, when we think about, again, the Netflixes and the Amazons of the world, we know that they're releasing fewer changes. They're making small changes and having, an automated delivery pipeline that can automatically kind of deploy those things into production. And typically, with the lower performers, we know that when they are releasing code, they're releasing a lot more changes. They're bundling a lot more features and, again, just overall changes and improvements to the code base in a single release. And we'll talk about, we know that that actually inherently introduces more risk. We know that when we ship smaller, more bite-sized pieces of changes, that then the risk and the ability to kind of recover if there is a negative impact from one of those changes is greatly improved. When it comes to lead time for changes, and we look at our elite performers, they're looking at, metrics of less than an hour, which is really impressive. And we'll talk about kind of how they're able to have such an impressive, how it's such a small, short amount of time for them to have that lead change. And really, the spoiler alert is that it relies so much on automation. And we'll dig into some of those characteristics and some of the things that you can use to help reduce your lead time. But we know that for, some of the other folks that are outside of the elite performers, this can range anywhere from, a day to a week, or even, sometimes in the months category. But ultimately, that's where, this is an area that I think is really important to focus on and to have good process to improve on this time. Because if there is a feature that's, ready to go, but it's just sitting there, again, not in production, not being used by your end users, that's just wasted opportunity for, that code base and that change to your code and to that new feature. So we, again, are really trying to reduce the time it takes to, have a new feature that's ready and to when it's actually being used. Again, time to restore service, mentioned this earlier. This is if there is an incident, how quickly can you recover from that? The elite performers, they're able to do this in less than an hour. And this really, there's so many different ways that we could kind of discuss and take this in terms of how you can have this capability. If you're leveraging the cloud, sometimes you can leverage kind of a multi-cloud approach and have the ability to, change your infrastructure very rapidly. But fundamentally, you don't want to not be able to have your end users access your software and your core product. So you really want to be able to restore service very, very quickly and pivot in the event of some kind of failure or outage. And, obviously we know that it can be really, really painful, but if you are, a lower performer, having kind of any kind of degraded service or outage completely is just such a hit to your business and to your organization. But sometimes these things can take time. We saw this recently. So this is definitely an area of focus that is it's a hot topic these days. I'll just leave it at that. And then again, change failure rate. So we talked about how, we're seeing the elite performers that have crazy deployment frequencies. They're releasing, multiple times a day or multiple times a minute in some circumstances. And you would think that as you're introducing so many new changes with such frequency, that you might be introducing more failures, that more of these changes would cause some breakage somewhere. But what we've actually found is that the elite performers actually have a very low change failure rate. And again, I really think that that speaks to and goes back to introducing those small changes, because you can have a really high degree of confidence of the impact that a small change will make when you have, multiple changes in, a release, for instance, that maybe is the culmination of, multiple months, of development work, it gets harder to reason about the entire impact that all of those changes are going to have across your code base. And that's what we see, with the low performers, is typically when they're releasing less frequently, they're introducing more changes, and so their change failure rate is actually much higher. So again, this really speaks to kind of having that rigor and that process around your software development and the overall deployment process, that you want to be introducing small changes more frequently is the takeaway. And we can see that here. I mean, the data is here right before our eyes, that is kind of the key to moving from, one of those lower tiers to being a high or elite performers, to adopt a process that allows you to ship software in that kind of manner. So now I want to kind of dig into a few of these, and again, really talk about how GitHub is helping you to improve on some of these metrics. So the first two metrics are all about velocity, deployment frequency, and lead time for changes. This is, again, it goes back to your overall software development process and how you're able to help automate as much of the process as possible to have a continuous, streamlined delivery pipeline. And so, we see our familiar kind of DevOps infinity loop here of the continuous flow of all of kind of really the software development lifecycle, from planning that, software release, to actually writing the code, to building, that artifact, to testing, the new changes, to actually releasing it, deploying it, and then operating it once it's out, living, breathing in the wild production environment. And that this should really be as, again, continual of a flow as process. And so really what that comes down to is leveraging as much automation as possible. We've, I think, come so far from just kind of traditional CI and CD of, running automated tests more on the CI side, or automating your builds of your software, to then, having actual mechanism of, promoting or deploying your built code into an artifact repository so that it's always there and available, ready to be deployed, or even to go so far as, again, maybe some of those elite performers are actually really fully embracing and implementing continuous deployment philosophies, and deploying all the way to production as soon as there is a new tested, ready to go piece of code available. I know that makes a lot of people a little nervous. Not all people are ready to just say, yep, if it's green, go ahead and automatically deploy to production. That's okay. But the point that I'm trying to make here is that you want to introduce automation in as many places as possible. And so really the best place that GitHub helps you here is with GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions are really just fundamentally a automation engine. They have so many applications and use cases outside of just traditional CI, CD. It's crazy, all of the different ways that you can really implement or use GitHub Actions. If you go to the GitHub Actions marketplace today, there are, lots of different categories that you can search through. And if you go to the continuous integration category, for instance, you will see, just so many pre-built actions that have already been built, tested, and are in use. Those are, again, really leveraging and leaning on the incredible open source community that GitHub, holds so dear to its heart and relies on so frequently. But there are so many, already ready to go actions for you to take advantage of. And of course, you always have the ability to build your own actions. So you're not limited by what's currently available, but there are a lot of places to start that can, kind of get your imagination going with how you can utilize these actions. But again, there are so many capabilities across CI types of tasks and activities. So, automating your builds or your tests. And then, of course, with the CD capabilities, automating some of your deployments for you. But there's also things that GitHub Actions can help you do, like that play within the infrastructure as code space. So actually automating tasks that provision an environment for you. That's one use case that I know not everybody knows that GitHub Actions can do. So how do you use things like Terraform to build an environment for you that then you can deploy your application to? So there are so many, again, kind of use cases that you can leverage actions for. It really is just kind of I like to say an automation engine that then your imagination can go so many different places with how you can leverage actions. I know that the last demo days was a talk on actions, so I will put a link, or maybe I could ask AJ to put a link to that talk into the platform, because I'm just going to go high level overview of actions in this talk, but there are much more in-depth detailed talks that you have access to. So I would highly recommend that you check those out. And so the other thing that I really just kind of wanted to touch on, even though it's not a DORA metric, when I really think about deployment frequency and lead time for changes, it really also speaks to, or it has a similar vein, which is improving developer productivity and efficiency and their overall velocity. You really want developers to be able to iterate as quickly as possible and to be able to do their actual development, do the coding that they are fundamentally responsible for achieving day in and day out. And so, two of the kind of capabilities that GitHub brings to market that really help with that are code spaces, which give you ready to go development environments. This allows you to really reduce the time as a developer that it takes in configuring a new environment. So you can already just have a image ready to go that you can spin up, and it has all of the software and integration and everything that you need already built into that code space, and in addition to the actual repository or branch that you're working on. So in terms of speeding up developer productivity and just their ability to be efficient, leveraging something like code spaces that takes out all of that headache and lead time of configuring their environment so that it's ready to go just to start coding on an actual project is a huge gain in terms of the time back that a developer gains. So that's a relatively new capability that GitHub brings to market. So again, I would encourage you to check out GitHub Code Spaces. And then another one that I'm really excited about is GitHub Copilot. So this is an AI pair programmer that really helps developers with some of the, just kind of stock boilerplate code that you might need to be responsible for when you're, beginning work on a new project. By leveraging Copilot, you can be suggested, a whole block of code to help you really just be more efficient in your actual development when you're actually, coding and working within the code base. So those are two other kind of features that GitHub provides that, again, they're outside of the DORA metrics, but I think that they're key because the faster your developers are able to work on new features and to actually, get that code to the state that it's committed and ready to go, the better. Your overall organization is only going to benefit from giving developers those tools to help them be, faster and to increase their velocity with actually developing and implementing those new features. And so the other thing that I just wanted to talk about, there are so many tools that already exist out there. I mentioned that Actions is a great automation engine, but it's not the only one that exists out there, certainly. And what we've really found is, in order to be kind of a true DevOps platform, we really aim to be extensible and to have good integrations with other tools, tool chains and technologies that exist out there today. We know that any given customer is going to have a whole mix of different software and tools that they are using as part of their development life cycle. And so, I would say definitely look at the actions that exist out there that have integrations with other tools you may be using. There are so many that exist within the marketplace. But then, outside of just the tools, it's so much also about process. And so you have to think about, as we're thinking about these two metrics with deployment frequency and lead time for changes, this is all about velocity. Again, of course, have the tool chain that makes sense that can help you introduce automation in as many places as possible to help really automate and make that a streamlined delivery pipeline for your code to, go from committed to running in production. But you also have to think about, how do you foster an environment for collaboration? Because it's not just, again, the developers who are, working on the actual features and then handing it over to be deployed and operated. The whole ethos of DevOps is collaboration. It's bridging the gap between developers and operations teams and giving them shared tool sets so that they can be jointly successful, and that they can, again, share tools so that they can gain similar views and visibility into the entire end-to-end life cycle. And I would posit that it's not just developers and operations that you want to bring together, but it's everyone that's involved in a software delivery lifecycle. So this is project managers and designers. So even, from the aspect of planning your code, you really want to, again, have a shared tool set that can make the entire team more productive, and to really, again, kind of foster and build for collaboration. So, when you have shared tool sets, you can streamline those processes. And so, again, this is another area that I just think GitHub is really, really strong, is because you can do things like code reviews, so that as new features do become available, it's the same platform that developers are already working in, that project managers or designers can go in and review the code that developers are working on and do things like make comments or send back with suggestions. And it really is a common place that everyone can come together to collaborate jointly to improve that overall software development life cycle. It's as much automating kind of the collaboration as it is the actual tool chain that you use to get code from developer environment or GitHub to running in production. So now, as we think about kind of the other two key DORA metrics, the time to restore service and the change failure rate, these are both really about stability. And we know that these are both metrics that we're trying to reduce. So specifically with the change failure rate, this is something that elite performers have very, very low. And so we talked about earlier how part of it is when you're making smaller, more frequent deployments, you're introducing smaller changes, which is inherently less risky. So that's certainly kind of one side of it, is having that just process and deployment capability that you're able to release smaller changes more frequently. That in general, as we saw in the overall table with the DORA metrics, gives you the ability to have a smaller change failure rate. But the other aspect that I want to touch on, and I'll bring this up a little bit later in the presentation when we're talking about the key findings of the report, is how do you also just make sure that the code that you're introducing isn't introducing any kind of vulnerability or could have some kind of impact in that regard. And so again, I'm going to reference, and I'm going to reference it again in the future, but the GitHub has a really strong security platform story. And there was a talk, I believe 2 weeks ago, by my colleague Glenn Wester, that was all about how GitHub, just what the story is with GitHub's security and the offerings that we bring to market, and how it can help you to shift security left so that it's much earlier in the process. It's part of the development, development life cycle, and so that it's more integrated, so that you're able to catch things earlier in the process, and certainly before they reach production. So I would say if you can have a stronger security posture and really start to think about security in that manner of bringing it earlier in the development life cycle, that will also have a huge impact on your change failure rate, because you fundamentally will be shipping more secure software. So that's also just one area that I wanted to kind of tie in when it comes to these two aspects. So if we talk about kind of the state of the DevOps report, and I just wanted to talk about the key findings that were surfaced as a part of this year's report. And so there were 6 key findings. I'm going to talk about 2 of them that I think are specifically worth calling out. So I'm going to hold off on those 2 really quickly. But the other ones that I just think are worth mentioning, that I just think are worth touching on, is that one of the key findings is that the highest performers are continuing more people are edging towards that that elite performer category and are continuing to raise the bar. So I think really the point that this is raising is that if you're measuring these things, like these practices work, they are driving real impacts on these businesses and these organizations. So, as we talked about, it's not just the tools that you're using, it's also the processes that you implement. But if you can start to measure where you fall on the spectrum and which bucket or category you currently reside in, and start to incrementally introduce some of these processes and adopt some of these tool sets and approaches, it actually does drive a meaningful impact and will continue to help you raise your own bar and drive towards becoming a more elite performer. The other thing that I didn't really go into, but I would say that the report does really touch on is the operational excellence. So I've really focused on a lot of the software delivery side of things, which is, I would say, the meat and potatoes of the DORA reports, but they definitely call out that it's not just software delivery and improving that, but it also really has to do with operational excellence. So I did also just want to plug that SRE practices go hand in hand with the whole DevOps ethos. And so if you're not as familiar with SRE, I would highly recommend that you check it out. It will not surprise you that you can Google it and it comes, and you can actually download the SRE Site Reliability Engineering book from Google. You can Google it, pops right up, and it's available for free for you to consume and read. And the SRE book is really I found it a great read because it's essay format, and so it just brings in so many different viewpoints and perspectives and point of views into how to run from an operations perspective, how to run production software with just such a high degree of excellence. I mean, it really talks about how Google, experimented and figured it out, and allows them to be the really top performer that they are today. So I would recommend that you check out the SRE book because I think it's a great resource, and I think it only helps to reinforce a lot of these practices that we think about within the software development lifecycle. You can't be successful at that if you don't have a strong operational process as well. So they really are tandem topics and something that you want to kind of be thinking about and attacking from both sides. So I just wanted to also plug that the operational side is also very important. But I mentioned that these two call outs are definitely something that I wanted to drill into a little bit more. And with the security side, I mean, in this annual report, the Accelerate State of DevOps from this year, there was a specific call out about security and really shifting left. I know that that's a buzzword term these days. We hear it a lot, of shifting left, which fundamentally means putting it earlier in your entire software development lifecycle and your whole process for that. But I love this little call out and just what they say in this paragraph of talking about security. Of it really allows you to just have a higher security posture when you're thinking about shifting security left. And over here on the right, where it says elite performers that met or exceeded their reliability targets were twice as likely to have security integrated in their software development process. So security really, I know it's again a buzzword, it's a hot topic, it's something everyone is really trying to improve upon and think about more and more in today's day and age. But it really shouldn't be treated as an afterthought or something that happens right before going to production. You want to really have the frame of mind that you're thinking about it so much earlier in the process. And again, Glenn Wester's talk from 2 weeks ago just goes in depth on this topic. So I would encourage you to check that out. But that's what we're all about here at GitHub. We're, in general, all about just the developer, the software development life cycle. And we really bring our approach and our philosophy to security is all about that. It's about implementing and integrating security into that software development flow. So that's part of and native to the developer. So to have security running and to have good policies that are part of the software development process, so that if there is a vulnerable pattern that a developer maybe unknowingly put into their code base, you want to catch that very early on, certainly before it's in production, but also before the developer has kind of forgotten about the context of what they were working on that day. If you can catch those things within kind of the same time frame that a developer is actually working on that code base, and say, hey, actually, that introduces a vulnerability. Here's some suggestions for how to remediate, or a different way to implement that piece of functionality. It keeps it within the attention span of a developer, which we all know can be a little short sometimes. So really trying to have it as integrated and native to the developer's workflow is something that we're working on, and kind of our recommendation and what we see as a best practice here at GitHub. And that's what we try to bring to our customers with our security options. So did just want to call that out. The other one that I wanted to call out, which I was kind of surprised by in reading the DORA report from this year, was how much they talk about documentation and how important documentation is. And when I read this, it was just like, thank goodness. Like, I have been waiting for someone to call out just the importance of good, clean documentation. It is such, I think, an oftentimes overlooked, or maybe not just championed enough, aspect of the software development lifecycle, but I think it is so critical and it's so key. And so, it says here that to have good internal documentation, which can take the form of so many different things, whether it's manuals, READMEs, even code comments, can really just overall improve your entire process. So it's some of the ways that GitHub is all about this. Obviously, we've always been big fans of just having nice, clean READMEs. It makes people that are coming to your project just have a clear understanding of what that project's all about. If they want to contribute, what are the contribution guidelines? Having things like that makes it so much easier for people to come in and who want to be involved, get involved. There's also, some other handy features that GitHub makes available, and that we certainly internally at GitHub use all the time, are using things like issue templates. So, if someone wants to submit an issue, giving them a template for, here's the information that we need from you in order to make this the most valuable, can just pay dividends in terms of overall efficiency and productivity. Also, the ability to have a wiki page, or to have discussions, so that you can have a page of frequently asked questions. I would say more and more, we're really recommending that you embed the documentation with your source code and within your projects, because it makes those who are maybe new to your project, that again, maybe are trying to use it and are looking for how to get started. Maybe they want to collaborate and contribute, and it helps give them guides for how to make an impact. It just can help the overall progress and improvement and innovation of that project. It can really just be such just jet fuel that you can add to that overall innovation. So that was the other thing that, again, kind of surprised me when I read it in the DevOps report, but I really just wanted to call out, because having good documentation, again, while it might not be talked about all that much, is so key to kind of a successful software development overall process. So that's pretty much it. That's I hope that maybe this helps, because, I read the reports, maybe now you don't have to. Nice little summary for you. And ultimately, what we're here to do, especially at GitHub, is we want to help you move from being wherever you are in the direction of improvement. So whether that means you're starting at low, you're moving towards medium, or whether you're already kind of doing pretty good, you're in that high column, but you want to make it to the elite performer. There are so many different capabilities that the GitHub platform, I would say, makes available to you that can help you improve across these 4 different metrics. And, I'm sure that there are a lot of power users out there today that are familiar with all the things that I've discussed, but there, in my experience and in conversations with customers, there are a lot of people out there that still just see GitHub as, a code repository. And that's really certainly the genesis of GitHub. That is our origin story, certainly. But we have come so far, and there are so many different capabilities and features and different applications and use cases that the platform in general can help you in the overall process of your software development life cycle, that's really what I wanted to kind of call out today, is that it's an end-to-end DevOps platform that helps you as you're trying to be more successful with DevOps. So I will, just kind of call out the elephant in the room today. I did not talk about how to monitor these things. That's definitely, kind of my recommendation number one, is that in starting on this journey, you should start to monitor yourself and where you fall against these metrics. So, I didn't have time within this talk today to talk about, there's so many different monitoring options out there today. I might have to come back for a follow-up talk in the future to talk about different monitoring options. But, the first place to start is definitely with capturing these metrics and understanding where you are and how successful you are at DevOps today, because it's only from that place that you're going to be able to find improvement. So again, that's all I have for you today. I hope that I articulated that, the GitHub platform loves DevOps, and we are here to help you on your journey and being more successful with DevOps. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to take a peek in the chat to see if there's any questions. AJ, I'm not sure if you're there. Let's see. I'm just orienting myself.
Yeah, I'm here. I did see a question from Rathi that says that there's lots of overhead with small changes and frequent deployments. For example, need people to do the deployment validations, downtime associated with that. Like, how do you suggest overcoming those particular challenges?
Yeah. So, Rathi, I do see, your I feel your pain, certainly. And the answer really is just in introducing automation. It sounds like a lot of maybe the pain you're experiencing is in kind of manual processes, and that is kind of the first step in being more successful and towards becoming a more sophisticated DevOps organization, is introducing automation where it makes sense. Obviously, you can go just way overboard with automation. So my recommendation would be to start small. I think with your specific example, I mean, obviously automating your tests and your builds is going to help you. If you have a pretty robust test coverage and test suite, it allows you to have a high degree of confidence of the changes that you're making within your code, that they're not going to break anything in production. So I think kind of the lowest bar to entry is just make sure that you have an automated and pretty cohesive, not cohesive, anyway, a thorough test coverage and test suite, so that you can, again, automate those things and have a higher degree of confidence that you're not introducing any breaking changes. So I would say that's probably the step number one. And then using automation to help kind of build your application and store it in some kind of artifact repository, so that when it's ready to go for production, you are in a state that you can deploy it. Getting into more of the CD side of things, the continuous deployment or continuous delivery, that can again be the next level up. That definitely takes some consideration to make sure that you are able basically to run at that speed. So first step I would say is just automate the testing and building of your code and make sure that it's in a ready state to be deployed.
Yeah, Cameron, I think you make a great point about, like, it's not just about ramping up the speed of your deployments to ramp up the speed of your deployments. Like, you actually have to put in the work to set up the systems, to automate the little things, so that when you do speed up those production deployments, that it doesn't break anything, that you're actually
Totally.
gaining speed because of the work that you've put in, not just because you're monitoring these metrics and just want to turn up the dials on the individual metrics themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to be doing things in a thoughtful way. You're not trying to improve these metrics. They're not just vanity metrics. They have real impact on your overall process. So being thoughtful, I think, is definitely a key aspect of it.
Yeah, it's not just about optimizing a specific metrics. Like, these things are intention, and you need to build something that works to drive them all forward.
100%.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Cameron. I really appreciate you talking to us today and giving us a good a really, really good overview of DORA metrics and the practical ways to use them. I'm going to switch gears for a little bit and talk about GitHub Universe. Seems that word's gotten out that registration is now open for GitHub Universe, which is streaming live on October 27th and 28th. Also, you might notice that many of the interactive sessions are already full, but don't be too discouraged if the session that you want to join isn't currently available. Just add yourself to the waitlist, and I know the team will release spots as they become available. Cameron, do you have any particular sessions or things to look forward to as Universe rapidly approaches?
Oh man, probably just too many to list. This is my first universe, and so I am just gonna be like a kid in a candy store, just running from main stage to breakouts and just everywhere in between. I'm just no, I can't summarize it all in a short, sweet list. We would be here for another 30 minutes. So
Yeah,
just excited to participate in general.
yeah, there's definitely going to be tons of stuff going on with the universe, and it is a different format. Like I totally miss being able to get together at the pier and join together in real life for universe. But this time around, the live stream program itself is short and sweet. It's 2 hours each day, and then there's also optional live interactive sessions, which I alluded to before, that you need to be able to register for it and join in on. There's also a ton of on-demand sessions, so it's you don't have to set aside 2 full days of your time to participate. Like there will be plenty of content that's available on demand, as well as some really exciting stuff that we can watch live and together. And I will be there for it all.
Totally. I'll be there too.
All right, thanks, Cameron. I'll see you
Of course.
soon.
See ya.
Bye. Thanks everyone for joining us today.